Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, we're in the third week of our global festival of yoga, and our theme for this year is wisdom, well being, and healing. And we have a special focus on Ayurveda, nutrition, and a plant based diet. So, our session this morning is going to be about balancing the diet with Ayurveda. And conducting this session this morning is Valerie Hwang, all the way from Long Beach in California. So, Valerie G, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Sophia G. Good morning. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So just to let our participants know, Valerie G is an Ayurvedic health counselor and a yoga nidra teacher. And she uses a simple diet, lifestyle, and the 5 sense therapies to promote healing and vitality in the mind and body. She studied Ayurvedic nutrition and culinary education, and she applies Ayurvedic wisdom to cooking and eating for balance and health. And this morning, she's going to be taking us through the basics of Ayurveda. So stay tuned. It's going to be a great session. Thank you so much, Valerie G. I'm going to hand over the session to you now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. And as mentioned, we are going to talk about balancing with diet this morning, according to Ayurvedic principles. So let's get to it. I really would like for you all to get from this presentation a practical understanding of Ayurveda and how you can take it into your life immediately after this. And what I will be doing is I'm going to be going over the basics. What is Ayurveda? What is the cause of disease? How do we get sick in relation to what we eat? It's very important what we put into our body. I will be talking about the 5 elements and the 3 doshas, the basic building blocks of understanding Ayurveda. The 6 tastes of Ayurveda, and then how to identify your unique dietary needs, as every single person is different. And there is really no such thing as a one-size-fits-all diet or even a dish. We can't really say that, there's one perfect dish for everybody. You have to know what it is in your body that you need. And then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. And you've already heard a little bit about me, so we will skip this one. So let's go into it. What is Ayurveda? So as you might already know, it's a very, very old nature-centered medicine that was derived in mostly ancient India. And it has carried over through all of this time to be present and still be of use to us today. And it is known as Yoga Sister Science, which is why I'm presenting here at a yoga festival today. It's very important for us as yoga practitioners to also be aware of this science, as both are rooted in ancient Vedic philosophy. And ultimately, the goals of yoga and the goals of Ayurveda are very intertwined. Ayurveda is a complete body, mind, and spirit approach to health and well-being. So we're not just curing disease from a physical standpoint, but also from the mind and ultimately the spirit. And so I have for you one definition out of many today from the Bhava Prakash, a 16th century Ayurvedic text, and that is that the science which describes life and its suitable and unsuitable foods, activities, etc., as well as diseases, their causes, symptoms, cures, and treatments is called by scholars Ayurveda. So like I mentioned before, it's really about what is good for you and what's not good for you, whether it is what you're eating, what you're doing, etc., etc. Okay. It's also important to know that Ayurveda, because it's nature-centered, Ayurveda views humans as a microcosm of the macrocosm. So all the forces that govern our universe also govern our bodies. All right. And because we are all different, Ayurvedic medicine is very individualized. So let's get into the causes of disease and why diet matters in this regard. So in Ayurveda, we know that there are 3 of these main causes of disease: parinama, asatmendriyata samyoga, and prajnaparada. And so translated into English, roughly, we can say these are changes due to time and motion, misuse of the senses, and failure of the intellect. So let's start with the middle one, just to go over what this really means when it comes to eating. So with misuse of the senses, it really is using our senses to indulge them rather than to use the senses as a tool for gauging what we need in the moment, because the senses are they're very powerful. That's how we experience the world, and the feedback that we get from our environment is telling us, well, this might be good for you, this might be bad for you, but at the same time, it's also, it can be very addicting, and it's very tempting to constantly try to feed the senses more. And so when we say misuse of the senses, it can be, seeing, you're craving a salty snack like potato chips, and then, but that in that moment you might need something a little bit more cooling, more moist, but those potato chips just look so good. And so you're misusing the senses by placating that craving for that salty, oily snack. Right. And then we have prajnaparada, which is very, very similar in terms of it's a failure of the intellect. And that's doing what you know that you shouldn't do, or that is not going to be wholesome for you, and still doing it. And so just in this picture, this man is perhaps late night. He went out to have fun with his friends and decided, oh, well, it's about, 3 a.m. and I'm getting a little hungry. So I'm going to have like a very heavy, cheesy burrito that's going to fill me up. But he knows that if he eats it, he's going to wake up the next morning with a stomach ache. Right. But against his better judgment, because it's comforting in the moment, he decides to eat it. That's an example of ways that we act in a way that we know is not going to be good for us. Okay. And then the last one, this change due to time and motion can be interpreted in a few different ways. But just for this example, you see there's a cup of ice cream in the snow. And so in the winter, when it's cold, especially if you do have this like damp winter, which not all of us do, but if you have a winter where there is snow and you decide, to eat ice cream, well, that's not very suitable for that season, because in Ayurveda, we have this idea that like increases like. So cold and wet in our bodies, and adding cold and wet to it is going to increase that quality, and then eventually that's going to cause us to have congestion and whatnot. So those are the 3 causes of disease in relation to diet. Okay, so now let's get into the 5 elements. This is a very important topic in Ayurveda, and it's how we understand how the universe works, and how actually how our bodies work as well. So in Ayurveda, we have these 5 elements, which are more like ideas. We're not really talking about elements like oxygen or iron, etc. But this is more of these ideas of forces. So we have ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And so these, think of them as, concepts. So ether would be the idea of empty space, the most subtle of all the elements. It doesn't really have substance, but it actually does contain everything else. And then air or Vayu, is the idea of motion. It's what governs anything that moves in the body as well as in the universe. And so you can think of wind, you can think of the blood circulating through our veins or our heart pumping, right? And the peristalsis of our digestive system. Anything that has a motion is going to be associated with air. Actually, thoughts as well. Then we have fire, Agni. So that is the idea of transformation, heat, and metabolism. Think of all of that which changes things. And so Agni is very important in the body because that's how we digest our food, but it's also what governs our sight, and it also governs our drive, right? And then we have the element of water, apas. And so water is a very flowing element and very sticky in quality. And so it governs it is the idea of cohesion, keeping things together. And so anything with water in it is going to have that a softness and flowingness, but also a bit of a heaviness too. And then we have earth, which is the most dense and the most heavy element. It is the idea of solidity or matter. And so anything that has a substance to it in this universe has this earth element to it. So in our bodies, of course, anything that is tangible, but the more solid it is, the more earth it has. So our bones have a lot of earth, right? And in the mind too, earth creates stability. So it is what keeps us grounded. And those are the 5 elements. And so building on top of that, then, we're going to look at the 10 pairs of opposing qualities, or in Sanskrit, they're known as gunas. Okay, so this is how not only do we understand how to look at substances, but also how to determine what is going to be healing or harming in one case or another. So each of these 5 elements have a quality. It has different qualities to them. They have a different set of qualities, right? And then food also has qualities. So if you look at these lists here, we have heavy and light. Those are opposing, right? Those are opposite, and they balance each other out. Dull and sharp also balance each other out, and so on and so forth. And you can think of the food you eat. So let's say you eat a donut. Donut is a very heavy food. On the other hand, you have popcorn or something like that, where it's puffed rice. It is going to be a light food. Okay, and then we think of dull and sharp. So something like alcohol is a very sharp substance, whereas like heavy cream is going to be a dull substance. And then you have cold and hot. So like cucumbers are cold, while chili peppers are going to be hot. Then you have like dry and moist. So kale can be a dry, those leafy greens of kale, very, very dry. And then avocado or another moist fruit is going to be heavy and moist, right? And those are just examples, but you can think of all the other foods that you eat and what the qualities might be for those foods. When we look at the elements as well, they have those set of qualities. And so within each of them, they're characterized. So ether is going to be cold, dry, light, and unstable because it is the idea of space. It doesn't really have anything to hold it down. Then you have air. And so air is going to also be cold, dry, light, and mobile being that key quality because air governs all motion, right? So, and then we have fire. So the key component of fire being heat. So it's going to be the only element that is actually inherently hot, but it's also dry, light, and unstable. And then we have water. So water being that sticky element is going to be cold. It is going to be the only element that is inherently moist. And then it's going to be heavy. Okay. Earth is going to be, because of its solidity and stability, it's going to be the heaviest element, stable, cold, and also dry. So thinking about all of these, this is how we understand all of the substances that we interact with. Okay, and that leads us to the 3 doshas. So if you have not heard of the doshas, this is really probably the 3 most important concepts to understand in Ayurveda, because within the body, these are what we can understand kind of as like the 3 physiological forces. And so within each of us, we have all 3 of these doshas working. And the doshas are each composed of 2 primary elements, and that determines the quality which they carry. Okay. And so we have gone over the elements, we've gone over the qualities. And so this is going to all come together now to look at these 3 physiological forces in the body. So Vata dosha. Vata dosha is going to be composed of air and ether. And so with air and ether combined, they are the lightest of the 2 elements, of the 5 elements. So they're going to be combined light, dry, mobile, and cold. And so what Vata does is that it governs all of the movements in the body, including thought. And it is actually considered the strongest dosha in the body, because without Vata, nothing would move. And so we wouldn't really be alive. And so, when it comes to nerve impulses or circulation, peristalsis, anything that requires any kind of movement, Vata dosha is responsible. Okay. Then we have Pitta dosha. So Pitta dosha is going to be composed of the elements of fire and water primarily, with fire being the primary element. And so there is that component of heat, and then the water is kind of that container for the fire. If you think about how our digestion works in the stomach, we also have that fiery acid, right, in the stomach, but also we have that mucous membrane that contains all of that. And so with that, we are able to metabolize and digest our food. So the qualities of Pitta dosha are going to be hot, oily, mobile, sharp, and light. And so in our bodies then, it's responsible for our digestion, again, metabolism and transformation. But also if you think about our logic, our ability to reason and also move forward, and also governs eyesight. So Pitta dosha is very important for us to get things done. And then Kapha dosha is going to be composed of primarily earth and water, with earth and water being the heaviest of the 2 of the 5 elements. And so it's going to have the quality of heavy, moist, solid, and stable. If you have a lot of kapha in your body, you will notice that you have actually more mass naturally, and you have more of ability to retain water naturally. So the function of kapha dosha in our body is very important as well. It governs growth, stability, resilience, lubrication, and even immunity is attributed in part by kapha dosha. Okay. You can also think of kapha as that which holds things together. And so like new tissue formation is also what kapha is responsible for. Now, like I said, each of us have all 3 doshas, but in different proportions. So some of us might have more vata naturally. And so with a vata, they say a vata type person or vata dominant person, they tend to be more long and lanky. They might have a irregular digestion, and they might have a little bit of irregularity overall, tend to be more slight in their build. Whereas Pitta dosha, because they have a very efficient metabolism overall, they have a more medium build. They can gain weight, but then lose it easily because their body's constantly able to process the food. And they also have a lot of that oily fieriness in them. So, they might be the ones who tend to get more acne, rashes, but also get a little bit more angry. So there's personality traits attributed to each of these doshas. Kapha dosha then is going to be like I said, a bit heavier built, but because it has a water quality and then the earth, right? Then they might be a little bit more soft in their personality. They might have more longer lasting friendships because that water is a sticky quality. They're very set in their ways because of that earth. So you might find a little bit of stubbornness at times with kapha dosha. Okay. So you might be thinking about yourselves too. What is the dosha that's dominant within me? What are the, what have I been like my entire life? And it does change. So we are going to go over, what it is that we are naturally supposed to be, and then what might be an imbalance in our bodies. And that then brings us to the concept of prakriti and vikrity. So within each of us, we have our perfect state of balance, and that is our prakriti. And each person has a unique composition of vata, pitta, and kapha that manifests in so many different ways. Each of us is unique in that sense. And, you can kind of break it down. Oh, maybe I'm like 50% pitta and 30% vata and 20% kapha, but it's a little bit more complex than that. Your prakriti never changes. So it, with very few exception. And so it is what you are, what it's determined at conception. So as soon as you start to grow in the womb, then you start to become susceptible to environmental changes. And that will bring us to vikrity, or your state of imbalance. Because prakriti, it's actually very hard for us to determine sometimes, especially in this day and age where a lot of us do have imbalances that are pretty advanced. So often prakriti is masked by vikrity. And though we can look at our past patterns to kind of get an idea of what our prakriti is, it really is actually more important right now to focus on your vikrity, because that is what your imbalance is. And so maybe if you've been very hard driven your entire life and you're burnt out, that's a sign of pitta imbalance. Or if you have a lot of anxiety and you are fatigued all the time, that could be a vata imbalance. Or if you have trouble losing weight and you're very lethargic and you've gained weight over the years, that could be a kapha imbalance, right? So any of those imbalances is what your vikrity is. Now, vikrity changes constantly due to the season, due to your age, due to your habits and lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to know what your vikrity is. But you can tell by listening to your body, actually, to determine that. So what I'm really here today is to help you understand then what is your vikrity in terms of your digestion, and then how can you use diet to help you balance it. And so I have a handout for you today so that you can follow along and mark for yourselves. And I believe it is already in the chat box. You can use that link to download that handout I have. But if you are not able to, you can also look at the screen and kind of, just overall see where you're at in terms of your current digestive imbalances. Okay. So looking at this, you can see the basic signs of vata dosha. And so, like I said before, vata is very light and mobile. It is composed of ether and air. So what happens when you have a lot of ether and air, a lot of motion in your body? Then your appetite becomes unpredictable because this digestifier, or agni, goes in and out. We call it vishama agni. And so sometimes you're hungry and sometimes you're not hungry. And sometimes you get hungry at odd hours. You might skip days when it comes to elimination, right? Because of that inconsistency. Because vata dosha is also cold and dry, sometimes you don't sweat a lot. You tend to feel cold and your skin feels dry and flaky. Okay. And you might have meals at irregular times and try to get by on snacks because you just don't know when you're going to be hungry. You also tend to get anxious when you miss a meal if you have a lot of vata dosha in you now. Also, gas and dry stools, constipation, or alternating constipation diarrhea can be a sign of excess vata dosha in the body. The tendency to feel anxious and distracted, and also some insomnia, so trouble getting a good night's sleep. Okay, those are all signs of vata dosha, and if you have a lot of these, that is a sign that you need to address vata. All right, and then it comes to pitta dosha. So these are all signs of pitta dosha imbalance. And like we mentioned before, fire and water is what pitta dosha is composed of. And so if you have a very strong appetite, you've been eating full meals, this is a sign of pitta in your body. Not necessarily actually an imbalance, but if you're very, very hungry, it might be, because we call that tiksha agni, or very sharp agni, digestive fire. If you have bowel movements more than like once a day, that's a sign of pitta as well, or loose stools. And if you get what we call hangry, or if you get irritated with if you've gone too long without eating, that's a sign of pitta. Or if you feel warm, if your skin has become like red or flushed, like I mentioned before, maybe a little bit of acne. Burning in the stomach can be a sign as well. If you have gas, it could tend to be a smelly type of gas. And your sweat, if you have sweat and it's odorous, that is a sign of pitta. And then a different type of insomnia than vata, if you have difficulty sleeping because it's hot, it is also a sign of pitta dosha. Okay. Then let's move on to signs of kapha dosha. So with kapha dosha, it being earth and water, imagine that heaviness in your stomach. Imagine that water in your stomach. So what happens when there's a lot of that going on? Generally, then your appetite starts to become suppressed. And so your agni is what we would call mandagni. It's sluggish and slow. And so sometimes you'll feel heavy and even sleepy after eating. With kapha, bowel movement tends to be fairly regular, though. But it tends to be more bulky. And so if you notice a little bit more of that, what we would call like a mucousy stool, that would be a sign of kapha dosha. And then kapha dosha, because of that heaviness, they also tend to benefit from fasting, because after they skipped a meal, they do feel lighter and more energetic. And that's not necessarily the case for pitta and vata dominant people who either get irritated or anxious if they don't eat enough. They do tend to produce a lot of sweat, kapha dosha, because of that water content, but it doesn't produce a strong smell. It tends to be more sweet. And then they might be more tend towards lethargy and lack of motivation, and have more trouble losing weight. They have more ability to gain weight. And then for them, sleeping is no problem, but they do have trouble getting out of bed. And then overall, more mucus production. Okay. So hopefully by now, you have been able to see where your imbalances are, and they might be all over the board. You know, some of us have more than one dosha being aggravated at once. That is not uncommon. So I'm going to go over then the 6 tastes of Ayurveda, and then how we can use this knowledge to help balance some of these symptoms you may be experiencing, right? So the whole concept of nutrition in Ayurveda revolves again around the elements, but how we conceptualize this is through the 6 tastes. So the tastes can give us a clue of what the nutritional value of a food is, the therapeutic effects of food, and metabolic effects. So each taste has unique elemental composition and also set of qualities. So just like we conceptualize the doshas in terms of the qualities like heavy, light, dry, moist, etc., taste can also be conceptualized in this way. And so it makes it easy to understand then what tastes are good for which doshas. Now, a healthy meal ideally does have all 6 tastes in appropriate proportion. So when I say that, pungent is not good for pitta dosha or sweet taste is not good for kapha, there's no way to really completely avoid. And in fact, it's not good to avoid one taste completely. And so it has to be in the correct proportions, using kind of that wisdom and your intuitiveness to gauge what is going to be balancing for your body. Okay. So I've tried to break it down in a simple way. And so let's look at taste from a nourishing standpoint and then a purifying standpoint. So the 3 nourishing tastes are sweet, sour, and salty. So overall speaking, these tastes help to build bodily tissues. These are the tastes that if you want to have more nutritive value, perhaps add a little bit more substance to your body and energy, these are going to be the taste to focus on. They all have somewhat of a heavy quality, and also promote moisture retention. And in the case of like sour taste, it increases your appetite. It makes you want to eat more. And so when you want to eat more, you build your body, right? Overindulgence in these 3 tastes can produce a buildup of toxins, or ama that we call, excess weight and swelling. So not having too much of these, but knowing when to have these is very important. So if you look at the chart over here, I've notated V, P, and K. So that's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So when we talk about doshas, we're always, in terms of healing, we're always talking about wanting to reduce the doshas. We never want to necessarily add more kapha. We never want to add more pitta. We always want to pacify. And so when you see VP with an arrow down, that means it pacifies that dosha. If you have too much vata or pitta in the body and you want to pacify it, then you want to take in the sweet taste. Whereas if you have too much kapha in the body, with the arrow up on that sweet taste, it means it aggravates kapha. So if you have too much kapha, you want to either avoid or reduce the sweet taste intake. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So with the sweet taste, it has the qualities of being cool, unctuous, satiating, building, stable, bringing stability and comfort. It is really the quintessential taste to keep us alive, in terms of like, we really do need a lot of the sweet taste. And we're not talking about sugar here. We're talking more about like grains, fruit like grapes, rice, milk, or dates, honey, oats, right? These are all examples of what sweet taste can be. And so all of us do need some component of this. But if you do have let's say a problem with weight gain, then these are some of the tastes you want to reduce in your diet or avoid. Now we have sour taste. So sour, we think of oranges, lemons, yogurt, vinegar, kimchi, or pickles, kombucha. Those are all examples of sour taste. And so sour is going to be very heating. It's going to promote digestion because of that. It helps build that agni and increases appetite. And then with salty taste, salty is going to be foods like seaweed or soy sauce, olives because of their the salt content, and also sea salt and any other kind of salt. So within salt, there's water and fire. And so it's moist, but also heating. Salt also wants to eat, also makes us want to eat a little bit more, which is why if you have like salty French fries or something, it helps enhance your appetite and also brings out the flavor in the food, right? So that is why salt can be a little bit addicting. At the same time, it helps soften bodily tissues and it helps draw in moisture. So because of the heating component of the salty taste, it's not so good for pitta, and because of the water wateriness of salty taste is also not great for a kapha because it promotes water retention. Okay, I think somebody's asking for the checklist in the chat. So if we can share that again, that would be great. Okay, so then let's look at the last three tastes, which are the three what I call purifying tastes. And these are going to be spicy, bitter, and astringent. So these tastes help cleanse and lighten the body. And they help remove excess tissues and dry up moisture. So if you think about it, it could be very therapeutic, especially if you have some toxic buildup or if you have some excess weight or water retention. This can help you rid yourself of some of that. But if we have too much of this, if we're over dieting, let's say, or if we're trying to do too much of this, then it can lead to emaciation, fatigue, and constipation. So we never want to overindulge in these tastes either. It would bring a lot of suffering in a different way. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail. We have spicy or pungent. So if you think about that, it's like take a chili pepper or some ginger. It's going to be going to have this dry and hot quality, and it helps burn fat, and it helps decrease any kind of phlegm or mucus in the system. Like if you have like this like mucousy cough, decongesting with some pungent spice can be very good. And it helps stimulate digestion as well as circulation. And to a point, we do need some spicy taste in all of our foods to help kindle that agni, right? And then we have bitter taste. So bitter taste is going to have a dry and cold quality. Bitter is actually very can be synonymous to like vata qualities because it's air and ether. So with that, it's very reducing. It helps reduce inflammation because it's so cold. And it helps lighten the body in a different way than spicy would. So spicy taste burns away, right? Fat. But bitter, we can think of it more as like a scraping action. So with that, examples of a bitter food could be bitter melon, kale, turmeric, sprouts, fenugreek seeds, or dandelion greens. And then the last taste we're going to talk about is astringent taste. So astringent taste is going to be dry and cooling. It helps heal wounds because think about astringent, it's like sucking moisture from something, right? So when you suck moisture from something, it tightens the tissues. Astringent taste can also help stop diarrhea, and it helps to cleanse the skin. So astringent elementally is earth and air. So if you think about earth and air, very dry, right? So examples of astringent taste are going to be lentils, chickpeas, pomegranate skin, sage, spinach. Those are all astringent taste. All right. So then let's go over what the best tastes for each dosha are. And so the best tastes for vata are going to be sweet, sour, and salty. And as you may notice, those are the three nourishing tastes, right? The ones that help build the body. Because vata, it being cold and dry, it needs nourishing and it needs grounding. So foods that are warm and hydrate and stabilize the body are going to be good for vata. So practically speaking, then, you could think of like a curried stew with rice or worm, cinnamon, and date oatmeal. Things that are going to be quintessential comforting foods that are warming to the body. You could go Italian and do a mushroom risotto or a veggie lasagna, right? Those are all examples of foods that would be good typically for vata dosha. Okay. And then we have the best taste for pitta dosha. So with pitta dosha, because pitta is always dealing with heat and a little bit of oiliness, we want to focus on sweet, bitter, and astringent. Now you might think, oh, sweet, that's interesting. But sweet is cooling. Sweet is heavy. And pitta has a very, fiery metabolism. So it does need to constantly fuel that, right? So sweet would help balance that fieriness. Bitter taste, because it's cold, is going to help cool pitta down. And then astringent taste is going to also help cool pitta and kind of purify some of that oiliness. So example meals can be something like quinoa, black bean and veggie bowl, like we have on the side over here. A falafel and veggie platter with rice, coconut rice pudding, whole wheat avocado toast. These are all foods that are going to be balancing for pitta. And you could probably imagine in your own, because I know I'm using very Californian examples, might not be typical in your diet. So think about the foods that are available to you that are also going to be cooling, that are going to be, slightly moist, that are going to be bitter. What are those foods that are available to you? Okay. And then let's move on to best taste for kapha. So as you can imagine, with kapha being primarily water and earth, it needs to purify a lot. And so it needs light, drying, and purifying foods to balance that heavy, moist, and substantial nature. So those tastes are going to be pungent, bitter, and astringent. So example meals for kapha could again be that quinoa, black bean, and vegetable. No problem there. Very compatible for both pitta and kapha dosha. A spicy papaya salad, like you could see in like Thai cuisine, has both the pungentness and then the all of those veggies can help lighten kapha dosha. A barley and kale tabbouleh or any kind of like green salad. I like to kind of cook the veggies a little bit because kapha, while they have a need to lighten, they also have this slow digestion. So they need foods that are a little bit more easy to digest. And then we have like a spicy green vegetable curry. That would be also a good choice for kapha dosha. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of our presentation. So just some general best practices. Didn't get to go into detail on these, but just paying attention to how certain foods make you feel and really getting to know your body. So in yoga, of course, we're always focusing and like cultivating awareness. And so when you're eating, it is also important to cultivate this awareness. And the more you practice this on a day-to-day basis, the more you are able to use these principles on your own, right? So if you eat a chili pepper, feel that heat. If you eat a cucumber, feel the coolness and the moistness. It's very important to eat according to season and climate and what's locally available to you. So Ayurveda is not about, using the foods that were written word for word in the Ayurvedic text, because that was, in India thousands of years ago. But things have changed so much too. You really need to know where you're living, what the season is, and what is local in your region. And then be aware of any changes in your digestion. So using the checklist that I provided would be a good start to seeing like, okay, where do I tend to go when I get out of balance? Then it's also, of course, to favor the fresh produce and the whole plant-based foods over packaged and processed. And I didn't get to go into this, but the concept of having high prana foods that still retain their life energy is very important. Because when we're eating something that's frozen or processed, you don't know how long it's been sitting. And, when you see a fresh salad, it's still beaming with life. And, after it's been stored in the refrigerator for a few days, you can already see like the green has gone away and everything. So, that you could literally see the life force in that food. And then eating freshly prepared food made with love. Taking time for your meals, focusing in on the food and like really appreciating it. Cultivating mindfulness around your eating is a great way to prepare the body to digest it properly. So it's not just like cultivating them, but actually like preparing your body to process the food the way it's supposed to be. Okay, and with that, I am going to so let's see here. Okay. All right, so I see there are some questions in the chat. Namaste, hi, Sophia.
Valerie. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. That was such a great presentation. It was so detailed, and I'm sure our participants learned a lot today. And I hope they sort of incorporate these values that you've suggested about diet into our lives, all of us, and especially for people who practice yoga, because anyway, we're so sensitive. Our bodies become so sensitive to diet when we practice yoga. So thank you so much for that amazing presentation and for all the hard work you put in for this session. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we do have a few questions, and now's a good time for anyone who would like to ask Valerie G a few questions. So we're starting with uh, Prajin Kulamji. She's 88 years old, and she's been a yoga teacher for 35 years. She says she has brittle nails and dry skin because of her Vata dosha, and she seems to have developed anemia and has been losing weight. So do you have any advice for her condition?
Yes, so this is actually very important, and you have a lot of power if you can take control of your diet. And getting enough rest is also very important. But like I said, the sweet taste, the sour taste, the salty taste, I think a lot of yoga teachers, it's like there's a lot of movement going on. Even if it's restorative asana, we're all, they're always going to be doing a lot of movement, a lot of talking. These are all vata aggravating activities. And then being 88, that's the vata time of life. So it's like triple, 5 times the amount of vata. And so it's very important to also ground, to do more restorative practices, get enough sleep, drink enough water. These are all things that you can do on a daily basis, and you don't need any practitioner to tell you that. So.
Okay, great. I hope that answers your question. Our next question is from Anju Ji. Anju Ji wants to know about how white salt has iodine and how much do we need, how much of this do we need in our food, and whether other salts have enough iodine content. And it's a question in two parts. That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, if you have an affinity for peanuts, does that signify any kind of deficiency? I think she really likes eating peanuts. So is
Okay.
that?
Okay, so the iodine question, it's interesting because, I don't think the supplementation of iodine in salt has been around for a long time. This is a relatively modern addition. I would say that if you have enough iodine in the diet, I mean, you could get it from seaweed, you can get it from sea vegetables. And it's not necessary to be too worried about it in this modern day and age. With the peanut question, unfortunately, Ayurveda does not love peanuts. And the reason is because it aggravates all doshas. It doesn't necessarily signify deficiency in anything. They're very tasty, but they're dry and they're hot and they're also oily. So generally, it's not a food that you want to be eating every day. And I love peanuts too, but it's just like one of those, okay, have it for a treat, but try not to have too much. Nuts would be better, especially if you have, let's say, a vata imbalance and you need the protein and you need the warmth and the grounding. Having some almonds or cashews or something would be a better option.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your question. Our next question is, how long should one keep food? How long can you keep food in a refrigerator without its losing its prana?
So I was very sad when I first learned this. But my teacher doesn't recommend leftovers. And I understand though that, we're in a very busy society. As soon as you put food in the refrigerator, it starts to lose its prana, unfortunately. So within the best of your ability, and like we all have busy lives, just try to eat the food as soon as possible. So my general rule of thumb is I try to eat all my leftovers within a day. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Valerie ji, for that answer. A lot of our participants are asking for the checklist. So, Srinivas ji or Koti ji, can we put the checklist up for them again in the chat box? Because we have quite a few people asking the checklist for the doshas that you had shared with us.
I think I can also do it. Here. There you go.
Okay, great. So I think we have time for a few more questions. Seema ji is asking you to recommend a substitute for ghee if possible, because she's vegan and ghee is dairy. Clarified butter.
Okay. So, acknowledging that the qualities are going to be different. You can use coconut oil. It has coconut oil is still cooling, but it's a different type of oil. It doesn't come from the cow. It's going from my experience, it is a little bit more heavy than ghee. But I've seen coconut oil recommended by different Vaidyas as well to vegan patients. Another oil option that is definitely not the same and doesn't have the same applications, but is overall a good oil to have around, is extra virgin olive oil. Research has shown that it's good for the heart. And while you cannot really cook with it at high heats, it can be added to like vegetables and salads and whatnot.
Great. There was also another part to her question. So Seema ji would like to know if you can recommend any probiotic food to her, or probiotics just generally.
Mm-hmm. So, probably the most common one is yogurt or curd. And that I think is widely available. There can be in the States, we have, especially in California, we have like kimchi. That's a good probiotic food. But also just as important is having prebiotic foods. So foods that have a lot of fiber and help feed the gut bacteria, like celery and I think like okra, things like that can also be very helpful.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Seema ji. Just one last question. Alka ji is asking how she has a lot of overlapping characteristics from the doshas. So how can she know what her predominant dosha is? And also she's 70 years old and trying to lose weight, but has been unsuccessful. So do you have any advice for her?
Okay. So it might be wise to see a practitioner if she needs to target a specific concern. However, with the doshas, it's not you. For constitution or prakriti, people do have like dual dosha too. So you can be like vata pitta type. You can be kapha vata type, and so that takes a little bit more of a diving into. And then in terms of losing the weight. If eating more light foods and doing the exercise does not work, then I think it would be wise also to see a practitioner. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Valerie ji. I think that's all the questions. I think we've covered most of the questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for asking such relevant questions. So just before we end the session, can we announce this evening's session, please? Kotiji, Srinivasji. So this evening, we're going to be talking about wisdom, wellness, and healing, which is pretty much the theme of our festival. And this session will be conducted by Shri Chandra Mohan Bhandari ji. So please join us for this lovely, he's a yoga guru and author. So hopefully all our participants, we'll see you this evening as well. Thank you so much for the poster. Valerie ji, can we have you back? Great.
Yes.
Okay. If any of our participants would like to get in touch with you, if they have more questions or are looking for some advice on Ayurveda, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes, I will put my website in the chat, as well as my email. And I do love to get questions, so don't be shy to email me if you do have some more concerns.
Thank you so much. That's so nice of you. And also, this session is recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel, the Indica Yoga YouTube channel. So for anyone who wants to come back and revisit her advice, or if you want to share her lovely advice with anyone, please do so. Just before we end the session, do you have any parting message for our participants?
Yes. So thank you so much for tuning in today's session. And I just want to leave you with this, that Ayurveda is a tool for your empowerment and something for you to take joy in. And, as long as you listen to your body, you can cultivate the knowledge within you to know what's good for you. So good luck, everybody. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Valerie ji. Again, this was such a fantastic session. We all learned a lot, and we look forward to collaborating with you again in the future. Thank you for being a part of Indica Yoga's Global Festival of Yoga.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and a big thank you to all our participants for joining us. See you this evening. Dhanyavad, everyone. Thank you.